Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back with another episode focused on a simple key to help you in your soul progress. And this particular key relates to this sense that people feel as if they're not good enough. Feeling not good enough. And that seems to be an epidemic in our society. I hear it from my executive clients. I hear it from people in which I'm interacting with, that they're not quite feeling good enough. With adolescents and teenagers and young adults, that they're not feeling good enough in the things that they're doing as it relates to work, relationships, personal goals or professional goals that they have for themselves, that they're not hitting the mark that they want to hit. So it hinders them and it moves them into the tumbling into this sense of feeling not good enough. And we need to break this down a little bit because it does have an impact on the soul. And what the soul is able to strive and be able to do, and maybe you're clipping its wings like an eagle, a beautiful eagle. You're clipping the wings for an inability to fly at the level and at the degrees that it wants to maneuver and fly and be free from this particular type of energy. Let's get down into it a little bit. And I was thinking, was this a simple key or is this a more complex key? And I want to talk about it in a simple way, but I'll probably talk about it again in the future as well, because there's other pieces that tie into not being good enough or feeling good enough that we do need to look into, because I think it is a critical component of why sometimes we don't make further progress on our spiritual path. And we're not even knowing. We can be blindsided or have a blind spot to not even seeing that this energy is sitting on us, and it doesn't need to sit on us nor be within us at all. So when we talk about feeling not good enough or being good enough, it's usually some degree of disappointment that's happened because of that particular job that we were doing and it didn't come out right. And so it made us have a greater sense of inadequacy in some ways because we didn't do the task the way it was being asked of us to do, maybe, or someone was very belligerent towards us that made us feel small and as if we can't do anything. So it really is, in a psychological way, it's known as this inadequacy complex. That's another word for it. And another word, too, is inferiority complex, which has been around for a long time because I think many people experience it. Now, it's okay to experience once in a while and get your feet underneath you in order to kind of maneuver and know what you need to do about it. But if it's happening to you all the time, that you're feeling a sense of inadequacy, not being good enough, and then that's when you need to look at it, because it can be really, these negative thoughts that you're having, and about, you may have concerns about how people are perceiving you and how you did that particular presentation or how you spoke in that particular meeting or board meeting, or it may feel as if it just creates this sinking feeling inside you of inadequacy. It's as if it becomes this degree of disappointment that you have with yourself, especially if you think other people are disappointed with you. We can get this fog in this, like you go into a shower, a hot shower, and the mirror fogs up. Well, this kind of sense of not being good enough can be like a fog that fills up the mirror with this haziness, and we don't quite see ourselves the way we really are. And we don't quite see that we have a lot of competencies, and there are a lot of things that we do well. And just because there's one or two things that are not being done at the level we would like to, it doesn't mean that we can't change. It doesn't mean that we can't learn the skills if we need to do that. What we intend to do, though, is personalize it. The degree in which we're personalizing it is sinking in to maybe self-loathing, hatred of oneself, and the sense of low self-esteem and low confidence in your abilities, even though you may have abilities to be a great singer, for example. You can, and you have shown that and proven that in some of the things that you have done in auditions or in a school play or what it may be. But we have to be aware of the fact that when these feelings of inadequacy and insecurity, whether it's actual or imagined, whether it's physical or psychological, does have an impact on the sense of deficit. And that sense of deficit, that feeling of less than, now that's creating certain clusters of behaviors that we may engage in. So think about this for a minute. Do you find that in those periods of time that you're not feeling good enough or you're feeling inadequate in some ways, some people will shut down and be quiet, for example. They will be kind of shy and not really express their thoughts and feelings, or would be withdrawn a little bit more because they don't want anyone to find out that this degree of inadequacy that they're experiencing, so they don't speak up. They don't say anything. It can be this quietness, even though they may have things to say. You may see it as manifesting as this cluster of insecurity. And it may even statements that you're normally saying to yourself that I'm feeling insecure about having to have this meeting with this particular person at work. And you have to have this meeting in order for you to talk about your progress on a particular case that you're working on. And this insecurity rises up because you're feeling some degree of not being good enough, inadequacy. Or may manifest itself in this cluster of behaviors of negativity, of the I can't do that. I could never do that. I don't want to go down that road and do that because I don't think I can. So this negativity that we're having and this kind of internal rumination that sometimes can take place in our inadequacies or not feeling good enough, that happens, that only is like a sliding board and it slides us right on down and off into the races of inadequacy. Not being good enough. Then it can manifest itself as being unhappy. But we are finding that we're never quite happy. There's nothing that really excites us or makes us feel happy or we get joy from. And so we daydream or we find that we're just not motivated. It's just low motivation that takes place. And so we mope around instead of walking strong and knowing that there are things in this life I'm going to learn from. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable at times. And yes, it may have some degrees of pain or awkwardness that happens. But does that mean I'm not good enough? I don't think so. So the thing that you have to check is, when I say I'm not good enough, what do I mean? What does that mean for me? Put it into words. Write it in a journal. Be very clear about what's going on here, that I'm getting a sense I'm not good enough. Sometimes it may be placed upon us because of parents always telling us that we're not good enough, we're not good at anything we do. And so that ongoing dialogue that happens, you may start to believe, and that's also tying into that sense of feeling not good enough in anything you do. It might be that perfectionistic parent. He wants you to do it better and better and better, and nothing satisfies that particular parent. But does that mean you're really not good enough? Because you may be an A student, or you may be able to do some extraordinary things with your hands in artwork, or with mechanical work, or with creative concepts to a project that you're able to engage in. But when we keep our mind on this feeling, or these emotions of not being good enough, it can be periodic, or it can be something that's more chronic that we're putting our attention to. Periodically, we're not feeling good enough or adequate. That comes with the living of life. And so it comes and goes. But when it's more systematic, that we're not feeling good enough, then that's when we need to look at this. We need to say, okay, why does this keep on lingering so strongly within me? And as if I'm badgering myself. And I need to challenge this in some ways, which we'll talk about later. Because if we don't, then we find ourselves moving into having a history of always feeling sad, mad, depressed, angry. That happens. We have to realize on the other side is the issue of trauma that may have happened to us. Or we've been involved in trauma and see it happening to someone else. And that's having an impact upon our perceptions and our thoughts and feelings about these issues of inadequacy. It may be also related to that we had certain goals that were lofty goals and that we didn't feel like we achieved them, but you may have achieved a large percent of the goal. Because you didn't do the other 20% of that goal, it was a failure. So you have now feelings of inadequacy, not being good enough. But you're not looking at the 80% that you did well. You were able to be successful. And the last 20% was something you might have to work on, sure. But it's really being willing to see the totality of the picture. Because this quality of feeling not good enough, it can be like a shadow that seems like it's always with us. And we need to shine some light to dissolve it and move it past the sense that it's weighing us down, is hindering us in some ways. So our meaning that we put to this, and that's why I asked you to write down what does it mean, feeling not good enough? How does it show up? When does it show up? What have you tried to combat that feeling? Sure, it can come up in relationships and who you're dating and how that dating process has worked itself out. It can show up in business meetings when you're feeling as if you don't know what to say or how to say it, and therefore you don't say it and because you're not feeling a sense of efficacy by which you can be able to express and communicate yourself by, communicate your opinions. The consequences of all of this, of wanting to feel better and feel that you are good enough, is we may flip and move into people-pleasing. And we're not realizing we're people-pleasing because of this degree of feeling not good enough. We just want to make sure people accept us, like us, value or honor us in some particular ways, which we're looking for that issue or those qualities around validation. And so it can be people-pleasing that we're trying to do that, or because of this sense of inadequacy, we move ourselves into this hyper-rational. We disconnect from our feelings, and we keep everything intellectualized as a way of protecting ourselves and not realizing that underneath our desire wanting to protect ourselves and be more rational to things because we don't want to feel these feelings of inadequacy is the not good enough quality that's impacting you in some way. And it does impact your soul, as I said, because it creates now this sense of inadequacy for the soul. It's just like a fragile line between you and your soul. It's as if your soul feels as if there's this disconnection, this static that happens. So how can you be able to be the captain of your ship if you're having a sense of inadequacy? Because the soul needs for you to see it, honor it, and also comfort. Just as much as we are looking for comfort through people-pleasing, the soul wants you to comfort it because you have the awareness that you're more than these events that happen to you. You're more than these circumstances that you find yourself in. You're more than what this person says or doesn't say to you. Your soul wants you to bring forth the awareness and create some space and becoming more aware of the fact that I have a soul, I have a spiritual path, I have the Atman, the Creator, the I Am Presence, all to support and help me as I'm moving through this terrain going on around me and within me. But what we tend to do is keep busy in the external world to do things. And what we need to do is be silent. Because the soul, as I've said in many episodes, has a degree of sensitivity. It needs to be protected, not imprisoned, by this sense of feelings of not being good enough. Because the soul says, no. We are more than good. Just because that event or that situation or circumstance didn't turn out the way we wanted it to, doesn't mean at the core of who we are that we're not good enough. We are more than good enough because we come from God and we're returning to God. And we're mastering life's experiences. We're learning skills. We're cultivating skills. That becomes important in our interactions, in relationships, at work, and even in our own expectations that we have of ourselves. The more that we move into being more critical of ourselves, loathing of ourselves, and having these qualities of inadequacy, it gets us further away from our soul and the harmony that our soul is needing to help to guide and direct us through life situations and circumstances that we find ourselves in. The more that we have an awareness of the soul, and that the soul has a purpose, and that there are lessons to be learned, just like going to grade school, first grade, second grade, third grade, on and on up, university, going on, grade school, what it may be. There's different tests that are being given to us in order for us to have a greater unity and a greater anchoring in something that is far greater than ourself, which is our spiritual path, the substance of our life, our soul, protecting our soul, being aware that our soul is in need of our awareness of it to help to guide, direct us in our life. The soul, as I've said, is on the course of trying to learn how to be more Christ-like in its interactions with people, with circumstances, situations that are happening to us, and knowing that we're not always going to do it right or in a way that would be helpful. But that's why we have each day as a new day of learning, a new day of growing. It's every 24 hours we have a new day that is upon us that we can learn to do something different and to work on certain qualities, to strengthen them within us, to develop the skill set, or to develop a greater awareness of what triggers us, for example, to have this feeling of I'm not good enough and start to work on it. Because, again, you're anchored in something far greater, far more wonderful, and we can lose sight of that. Let me talk a little bit about, and I'll spin back around and talk about the soul a little bit more later, but I want to talk right now about traditionally we do have steps. We can do things to help us get out of this mode of feeling not good enough, and I'm going to talk about some of them. Ways, approaches, or that we can feel a greater sense of security, a greater sense of anchored, as I said before, in the awareness that life is transitory. Today I may be feeling this way, tomorrow I can be feeling a little bit different way. But because as a spiritual seeker on that spiritual path, we're anchored in something greater than ourselves, and our goal is to be able to be aware that Jesus showed us the way. And now we have an example and can do and emulate some of the qualities in which Jesus showed us in his mission in our life. And I think we all have missions, and we all have purpose, and we all have a divine plan that we're here to fulfill. Back to these approaches that you can have for yourself when you're feeling this sense of not being good enough. First and foremost is cultivating emotional regulation. These are skills that you can develop. That the sense of inadequacy in difficult situations may happen for you. And you may find yourself feeling a little bit flustered, a little bit anxious. Breathe. Ask your inner self, what should I do here? Your inner self is your higher self, your soul self, your Christic self, your intuitive self. Asking yourself, what do I need to do here? I'm not going to be moved by this energy of feeling not good enough. And instead, I'm going to acknowledge I am more than good enough. I will learn, I will grow, I will move in a different direction as I need to. Because what happens is we get hyperly aroused, and this flooding of this inadequacy or this feeling jittery or uncomfortable, or are we going to be able to make that decision? Or are we going to be able to have clear thinking about something? Because when we have this emotional arousal, we usually don't think very clearly, because the inadequacy is so much in our face. We don't make good decisions either because of this emotional type of state that we find ourselves in. What we can do is learn more effective ways to regulate our emotions and our feelings when they're coming up for us, and reduce some of the negativity of our thinking, because our thinking leads to our feelings, and our feelings move into our behaviors. So the more that we can be able to catch that negative thought that's coming up of inadequacy and put in its place, I'll be fine. I will learn from this. I will take it one step at a time. Something that is affirming, that's true, something that you believe in, that you can do, becomes really helpful. When we lean into these emotions when they're coming up of inadequacy, then you're going to say, I'm going to learn the skill of observation. I'm going to observe what happens, how I may get flustered, and then I'm going to be more intentional about how I want to lean in to having a conversation with clear mind, clear heart, so that a person can understand where I'm coming from. So sometimes that requires slowing down our speech, even slowing down our behaviors, asking more questions for understanding. Because when we're feeling a greater sense of not being good enough, we're so focused on ourselves, and we need to break that. We need to ask the inquisitive questions of the other person as we're breathing and having a greater understanding of what they're saying. That may give us more information about what we will need to do in the situation, because, again, we have more awareness, more understanding. Now, this next that we can do and help to combat or master these feelings of not being good enough is cultivating and practicing self-compassion, kindness to yourself, self-care. Or how are you taking care of yourself? Are you making sure you're getting the proper amount of rest? Are you making sure your diet is a healthy diet? Are you making sure that you're drinking enough water? Some simple things that we tend not to do that we can easily do to make sure our body is feeling, as if we're taking care of it, and it allows us then to have clarity of mind. And also, it shows a degree of compassion we're showing to ourselves that we want to show to others as well. When we notice them having degrees of inadequacy, how can we be kind to them and have them to be able to come in attunement with, are they eating right? Are they having kind thoughts and words to themselves? Because we have this inner dialogue that happens. It's this inner dialogue that can go on. It's like, oh, you did that terrible. Oh, God, my God, you could have done that so much better. What's the matter with you? All this internal dialogue that happens for us, that we can be able to say, stop, stop, stop. Now, I see it happening. That's the cultivating. And then I say, what would be the more compassionate thing that I can say and do here for myself? And observe, or read something that's uplifting, or have some inspirational music that you can listen to that helps you get in a different frame of mind. And that brings up the next quality that we can do to help us when we get into these feelings of not being good enough, is developing or cultivating a growth mindset. And the growth mindset is one in which we are willing to grow and improve. And that is so important to our soul. Our soul needs us to be in a more growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. That'll never improve. It's the type of fixed mindset. Or this will never work out. it's kind of seeing the glass half empty, and that we can't be ever adequate. That's not true. But when we start thinking about and start reflecting on what would be our growth mindset, how would that look like in our life? How would that show up in our life? What would be the advantage for me to have a more growth mindset? Read up on a growth mindset. Look at videos on a growth mindset. We start to understand the nuances about how we can change our thinking to be more in a growing way, which is more in alignment to our soul and our soul's evolution. As if through developing these particular skills of the growth mindset, being more self-compassionate or regulating your emotions, and I'll talk about a couple of other things as well, you're developing this treasure box of skills and approaches that you can be able to use on a consistent and a regular basis that moves you past these feelings of not being good enough. But you have to do it on a regular basis because we know from psychology, habits are based upon things that we do repetitively. And so if you want to develop a new habit, then you're wanting to do it in a focused, intentional way. And we also know that where you put your attention to is where you get your experiences around. So put our attention to those things that we want to cultivate, we want more of in our life. And one of those things is that we want to cultivate and capitalize upon your strengths. We all have natural strengths. We all have learned strengths as well. And we want to be able to focus on those things and not so much always on the mistakes and the errors that we made. We want to focus on the things that we are doing well and how do we use those things that we do well in order to help us move past these feelings of inadequacy and start telling ourselves what we're good at, what we show experiences have shown to us what we're good at. And when we're doing that on a consistent and regular basis, we're refining ourselves, developing ourselves, because we're now willing to be able to persevere through the situation, which was one of my last episodes last month that you can go and listen to. We are persevering because we're willing to know that life is here for us to practice, practice, practice. Like playing your piano. We become good at playing the piano through practicing and being intentional and hitting the right chords that we want to do. The other thing with this understanding of strengths, it helps the soul. The soul now flourishes around those strengths and is happy that you're aware of those strengths as a way to pull yourself up in vibration, because this feeling not good enough is a lower vibration that takes us away from our true path, our true spiritual direction that we want to move in. It creates a facade, which you heard me talk about before, about this ego persona, which is a facade of this energy going out, of comparison and competitiveness and, always thinking that this person is better than me. And we want to say, no, I'm not getting into that. That's not the path of a spiritual seeker or on walking a spiritual path, whatever that path may be for you. Sometimes we also need to, in this cultivating, understanding what we can do to kind of reduce the sense of not being good enough, is seek out help. Sometimes from friends, from family, from relatives, from a minister. We can seek out help from a counselor or a coach to help us to get a greater perspective about things. Because when we're in something, maybe we can't see it very clearly because we're so deep into the situation of inadequacy that happens. It can be rough at times because it feels so much of a weight on you. That why not ask for help? Asking for ways that you can modify your expectations or your viewpoints or how things have happened in the past and how you want them to be when you're moving forward in your life. So there are things that we can do if we're doing it on a regular basis to help to reduce these feelings of inadequacy. Now, what does that mean to the soul? Our soul wants us to know that we just don't survive, but we thrive. We thrive in positivity. We thrive in understanding the lessons that are being taught to us. We thrive because we see the greater awareness of God's perspective of this situation happening. We're asking more of God to come into our life and help us, to guide us, to show us what we need to do in a particular situation. We're reading the Bible. We're reading something inspirational. We're meditating. We're finding ways to get close to that inner core, that inner self, where the soul resides. And we're moving away from this human creation of not being good enough, this human concept, this persona that we're now personalized and think it's us, all of us, but feeling not, because we never get to do anything right. But usually that's not quite true. There are things we do well, and there are things that we don't do well. And that's okay. That's a part of living. That's a part of growing. That's a part of life that happens. So, and sometimes because of socialization that has occurred, and through the media and through social media and through our parents even, we think we have to do it right 24/7. Therefore, we don't feel hurt or pain. And that's what the goal of life is. No, not really. Not for the soul. That's not, the soul is like, if you feel pain, okay, that means you're going to learn more from it. You're going to grow in some ways from it if you wish to take that perspective. And the soul is always looking for a greater awareness of your awareness of its being and its desire and wanting to be best self. Want to be that best self in everything that it does. And being the best self doesn't always mean that you have to do it perfectly. That's not what the soul's desire is. I don't think anyone on this planet does anything perfectly. We're learning from each other, and we're learning to grow, and we're learning to have compassion for ourselves. And we're also learning how to be able to recognize false narratives, false statements that we're saying to ourselves around this feeling not good enough. And if our feelings can be like on the second grade level, they feel true, they feel quote unquote right, but they're second grade level. And we have to realize we have to help to nurture those feelings to come to a higher awareness, a higher sense of itself. And we do that by observing, looking, and asking for guidance, and being aware that just because we feel this way doesn't mean it's the way I'm going to feel tomorrow. Just because I feel this way doesn't mean it is accurate or right. There are certain things we're telling ourselves. And in that telling of ourselves, we're making ourselves believe that that's our reality. We have the opportunity to create another reality, a shift, make a pivot, move in some ways, so that we're not getting into this habitual state of inadequacy, this habitual state of feeling not good enough. And we want freedom. The soul wants freedom. It wants the freedom to be able to explore, to understand, to be guided, to be aided, to understand the higher self of the Christ and the Christ virtues and principles and the Creator. It's wanting its freedom to have that availability through where you put your attention to. Ultimately, the more that you and embracing your soul is aware of things, then yes, you may experience pain at certain times, but it's a different level of pain. It's a pain, yes, because it now becomes a pain of learning and not a pain of dread. It becomes a pain of learning to say, okay, I'm going to celebrate my growth here. I understand that this is not the feeling or the vibration or the frequency that I want to be at. And I want the space to first and foremost not fill that space with doing things, but fill that space with reflection and just being, okay, and experiencing and embracing the uncomfortability or the awkwardness, embracing the duds, quote unquote, D-U-D-S, the duds of life, the things that didn't work out the way we wanted to. And we're facing it and looking at it from a calm perspective, a harmonious perspective, an inquisitive perspective, acknowledging that it's not a matter of fact if and when we're going to get upset. We're going to get upset by things. We're going to not be happy about how something happened. We're not going to feel always that we did it in our best way. But that's okay, because we'll learn from it. We'll grow from it. We have the next day to be able to continue on our path of understanding that God is shaping us in some ways through those experiences. They're creating divine awareness about how we need to show up differently, how our speech need to be different, how our attitude and our approach to a certain thing may need to be refined in some particular way. It was all about this situation or the circumstances or the people who come up into your life, about how I show up, what I'm aware about myself, how I can see these situations as opportunities for perspective taking of the Christ level, at the I am presence or the Creator or the God level, at the level of the soul and the soul substance and the evolution of that soul and what direction we need to move in, and also what those things create in us a sense of inadequacy, and what do we want to do about that? And how do we want to maneuver in a different way and not take it so personally that it sinks our ship, sinks our boat, gets us off our path or our spiritual walking that we want in our life. And we need people around us and support around us to keep us always aware of the fact that we are good people, that we are willing to strive and look for something greater than ourselves. And that through that practice of going to church, or through that practice of reading the Bible, or through that practice of looking at something inspirational as a movie that gives us a greater glimmer of understanding about ourselves, all that is good as we walk our spiritual path. Something to think about. And I may do another segment when I'm thinking about this, about not being good enough. What do we need to do in terms of the quality of worthiness? And there's other pieces of that in terms of feeling not good enough, or feeling that somehow you'll never have a sense of fulfillment, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of wholeness and completeness. There's some components that tie into that. And another component, as I'm thinking about this, is worthiness and what that means to you. Something to think about for now as I talk about it in the future. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.